In the middle of a massive battle, my players thought they were going to die. Hope of reinforcements was dwindling until they heard the first few notes of Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. Without me saying a word, they knew there was still hope. Like Gandalf and the Rohirrim charging into Helm's Deep, they knew they could win. Speaking of the greatest trilogy of all time, you know how in Lord of the Rings, every time it cuts to Isengard to show us what Saruman is up to, the music goes... And we, the audience, get this sense of, oh man, it's going down. Because at that point, Howard Shore, the composer, had conditioned us into associating that particular line of musical motif with Saruman's plotting. Or how in Denis Villeneuve's Dune, when we get hints of Paul Atreides' destiny as the Nissan Honda Jeep, we hear... What if you could do that to your players? Give them that intense feeling. Hit them in the gut with a kind of oomph that only music can provide. Well, then we need to talk about Pavlov. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where I admit my failed ambition of being a radio host and turn it into a problem for my players.
Do you know I was a radio host in college?
What? My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 10 years. Music is incredibly powerful, and I want you to use that power to emotionally manipulate your players. Have you ever heard of a Pavlovian response? It comes from a behavioral procedure known as classical conditioning. It was studied by a Russian physiologist named Ivan Pavlov, and it's actually a pretty straightforward process. Classical conditioning happens when you build an association between a stimulus and an event. I'm simplifying things, but I never went to college, so deal with it. In Pavlov's case, he was studying dogs. He noticed that they would start drooling whenever they were near the person that fed them. So to experiment, Pavlov played the sound of a bell whenever the dogs got fed. After a few repetitions, the dog started to drool whenever the bell got rung. So he associated the stimulus of the bell with the event of the dog's drooling. You can do this to your players. By getting them to associate certain songs with certain actions, you can influence their perception of what's going on. You can do this with your players. By getting them to associate certain songs with a certain action, you can influence their perception of what's going on.
He's struggling. Cat.
Cat. Hello.
We love Pjakkur. Oh my god.
This is the neighbor's cat. Music plays an important role during the session. It makes us feel like we're in a movie scene. It sets the mood, and it can emphasize certain moments during combat or roleplay. I think every D&D campaign should do its best to incorporate music. Now, I use Spotify. I have a bunch of pre-made playlists that I cycle through, including a pre-session playlist that gets us hyped to start playing. It's a monthly subscription, so if that's not your jam, you can use alternative methods like YouTube playlists or soundscapes. Since I use a laptop while DMing, it's very easy for me to adjust what's playing. Whether I need to change up the music because we've entered combat, or turn on some rain sounds due to a change in weather while we're exploring. Having everything right at my fingertips allows me to be reactive. A laptop is super useful. I highly recommend it. You can get all kinds of ambience on YouTube, but there's also this site called thesoftmurmur.com where you can stack environmental sounds on top of each other. It's fantastic. I play the music through a speaker, which is connected to the laptop via Bluetooth. It's a dedicated speaker for our games, and it's always connected to a power supply. Nothing else uses this Bluetooth speaker, so it's never getting stolen by anything. Nothing kills the mood more than the music suddenly cutting out. I'd love to get a direct wire connection eventually, but Bluetooth is still a very solid option, especially for now. There's lots of different speakers available depending on your budget and size restriction. I find this to be a pretty accessible solution. For ages, I had one that cost like nothing, like 2,000 ISK or something. With Spotify Premium, I don't have to worry about ad breaks or anything like that. Same if you have YouTube Premium and you're using YouTube. There's also a huge community of D&D playlist creators, albums, and more on the application itself. If you're already a Spotify user, I cannot recommend this enough. And if you're not, it has my endorsement. This isn't sponsored, I just love using it. You can queue up tracks, adjust the queue on the fly, loop songs, and shuffle as needed. As I mentioned earlier, YouTube is also an option, but you're going to run into ads, just like with Spotify, unless you have a monthly subscription. If neither of those solutions work, I guess you could burn playlists onto CDs like we did in the distant past. I don't know, if you got nothing but time on your hands, power to you, I respect it. But I'm going to continue using Spotify. Speaking of the D&D creator community on Spotify, I'd like to specially highlight Brian Davis's playlists. I use them in basically every session. I love how diverse and flavorful they are. There's always the right amount of drama, and it always adds to the mood of the scene. I use his playlist SKT Greygate all the time, but it's got this one trailer soundtrack to Darkest Dungeon's House of Ruin, and it ruins the mood all the time. If I were a better DM, I would have made my own playlist by now, but deep down, I'm a lazy DM, like Sly Flourish teaches us to be, so I just skip the song every time. I encourage you to listen to various playlists, rip them off, and create your own. Mix and match to whatever your heart's desire, whatever mood you want, you can create it. Also, don't be afraid to loop music. You can get away with it for a lot longer than you might realize. If you have a relatively short playlist, just putting it on shuffle and loop gives you a lot of room to work with. I do it all the time. If you are making your own playlists, I would suggest picking video game music over movie music. Movies are scored for scenes, and a scene is 1 to 2 minutes long, whereas in a video game, you might be standing in a room for hours on end. So when they compose video game music, they make sure it's loopable. The same is not true for movie music. Use the playlists to your advantage. Associate them with specific vibes or feelings. Have a downtime playlist, an exploration playlist, a calm playlist, a frantic playlist. Whatever the mood is, you can make a playlist for it. Or use playlists made by other users. You can also associate them with specific locations. I've made 3 playlists specific to Westwood, a region in my world that's a lot like the Wild West, and I only use them when we're playing in that region. You could also make them a bit more location agnostic while maintaining a smaller scope, like a temple playlist or a jungle playlist. Basically, make playlists. I highly recommend stealing songs from media you like, or media whose music is evocative. I would avoid anything that's too recognizable though, as it might be distracting at the table. But even then, I used to listen to the Hans Zimmer Sherlock Holmes soundtrack a lot and associate it heavily with those movies, but then I started using it in my games, and now it's a theme associated with my campaign. Same is true of lots of music that I used to associate with one thing. It is now a part of my own D&D canon. I remember watching Darkest Hour, that Churchill movie with Gary Oldman, and when Winston enters the war rooms for the first time, I vividly thought we were about to start a session of my campaign because I associate that song so much with the beginning of my games. It was kind of wild. Something I do now for all of my campaigns is pick a starting song that begins at the beginning of a session, and I use the time to read an opening monologue. It really helps create the feeling of, okay guys, we're starting the session now. I've conditioned my players to the point as soon as they hear the opening notes, they sit up straight, they look at me, and shush any players that are still yapping. I also pick a credit song that indicates the end of a session. There's often a cry of no when the song starts to play right after the cliffhanger. Sometimes there's just silence if it's been a heavy session. This then transitions into a post-session playlist filled with pop music and dad rock, let's be honest. We often sit around afterwards and talk about what happened. The chill music sets a contemplative and chill vibe. A neat thing you can do is give players theme songs. That way, certain fictional characters have themes, leitmotifs. Players can pick their leitmotif before the campaign, or maybe you do, and then you play it during appropriate moments. If they have a somber theme, play it during tough moments. If they have a heroic theme, play it when they do something badass. Try to keep it to just a few songs. If you make one for every player and every mood, they'll just get buried and forgotten. Pick a handful. That way, they're more memorable. You can stick all your player character themes into one playlist and just cue things up out of it when appropriate. Sometimes a dramatic moment happens when a particularly good song is playing from some playlist by accident. I then add that song to my themes playlist, and I cue it up the next time I want to create that association with that feeling. I keep the classical conditioning going. Just like you do for your players, you should give your bad guys themes as well. There's a villain in my campaign that's heavily associated with the Westwood. When she shows up, I play Rose Creek Oppression from the Magnificent Seven, and it works. My players immediately recognize it as her theme. In my last long campaign, the one that ran from level 1 to 20 over 6 years, I would occasionally start sessions with a cutscene of what the bad guys were up to. I always played the Cyberman theme from the Age of Steel episode of Doctor Who. Those first few notes get my players tense. The more you play these playlists you use, the music you choose, and the more you know it, you'll be able to speak in rhythm with the music. I've gotten pretty good at being able to time dramatic moments with certain rises and falls in the background music, simply because I've heard it so many times. Another skill I picked up doing this is volume control. I often got one hand on the volume buttons on my laptop's keyboard, and I'll lower and raise the volume as needed, mixing it to the scene. Sometimes when I need the attention back to me to deliver some important bit of news or whatever, I'll raise the music slightly so that it's just a little bit more intrusive, and in the pause that it tends to create, I'll inject with my bit of setup. The more you play the music, the more your players will begin to associate it with your world. Whether it's a location, a character, a feeling, the music in your game can inspire just as much immersion as good roleplay or good world building. Don't worry about the fact that you're emotionally manipulating your players. I'm sure you're already doing that anyway. At least I am, considering how invested my players get. One time, I accidentally killed an NPC that my girlfriend liked, and she cried about it for about a month.
Shut up!
Yeah, he got resurrected, but now Octavia owes the Raven Queen some big favors. Being able to instill anxiety in your players, or fear, or happiness, or even hope, just because of the music you're playing, it's a powerful thing. Don't ignore what it can do for you and your campaign. If you dream big enough and plan accordingly, you too can make your girlfriend cry for a month.
I said shut up!
She wrote this script, I promise. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. Me and my girlfriend run this channel, and today we're celebrating reaching 20,000 subscribers. We're planning on doing a live stream Q&A on January 1st at 10 p.m. GMT. That's 5 p.m. EST and 2 p.m. Pacific time.
You can Google it.
There's a chart
Somewhere.
Now, we've never done that before, and we have no idea how it works, but I'm sure we can figure it out. If you want to make sure your questions get answered first, you could become a channel member and join our exclusive Discord. There's a chat on there where members can submit questions, and of course, talk to each other about whatever. My favorite chat on there right now is the Art Corner, where members are already sharing some beautiful stuff they've made in their home games. Both AB and I are on there along with my group of players, and we're all happy to answer questions, talk about the hobby, the channel, my world, or whatever else, whatever you've got on your mind. If that's not possible for you or not enticing enough, consider supporting us in other ways, such as liking the video, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and hitting the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.